Hey, good evening, everybody. Excited to have everybody join us. I want to take a quick opportunity to most of you are used to seeing Anthony here, and so I just want to introduce to you Anna Lou, who is one of our marketing managers, marketing content managers, and I'm also proud to say that she's a former student of mine, University of Chicago grad, and Anna's been awesome. So. Anna will come back at the end and jump in and work on some questions with us together. But uh, but great to have Anna with us together.
Thank you.
All right, all right, all right. We'll see you in a bit, Anna. All
All
right,
right. See ya.
fantastic. Hey, before we get started, if you don't mind, go ahead and go on to the chat and let us know where you are calling in from. I know there's always a range of people from different places. Just go ahead and just kind of put down your city and state or country, and we certainly have had families, students calling in from from the Far East. We've occasionally had some Europe, but appreciate all the California people coming in strong. Sunnyvale, Los Gatos, Northern California, um, Oklahoma City. The Oklahoma City participation has always been strong, so I appreciate Oklahoma City, San Jose, lots of Northern California. Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. I have family in Winnipeg and have been to Winnipeg. It's awesome. And so, but a lot of Bay Area, SF, San Jose, Northern California, Palo Alto. Appreciate all of you who are coming in. We'll do our best to kind of get through our topic for tonight. And those of you who are on the West Coast, you can go back home and watch the finals of Olympic women's ice skating, which is certainly what I have earmarked with my wife later tonight. So I'm excited for you. Hey, tonight's topic is building a college list that works for you. And invariably, as I was preparing the content for tonight, the reality is that like this is a conversation that probably deserves an 8 hour ultimate guide that we can talk about in six parts, and perhaps we can pitch as a 6 episode series, whatever the case may be. There are so many little nuances, and I think once we get into some of what we're going to talk about, I think it will invariably lead to more questions. So just as a reminder, please go ahead and post questions in the Q&A box. We will tackle all of them at the end, and I think we'll have like ample time at the end to answer a lot of questions. So go ahead and post whatever you like at any time, and Anna is going to come on together with us to work our way through all these questions. But nevertheless, the goal for tonight for me is just to introduce the topic and to give you a beginning point of where to go. And as you go, perhaps again, there might be more questions or whatnot, but where do we get started with all of this? Let me do a quick introduction of myself. My name is Elton Lin. I'm the CEO and founder of Lumen Education. I've been doing college advising for more than 15 years. Our team at Lumen Education, we work with more than 400 students a year, submit 2,000 apps a year, read probably over 3,000 essays a year. So even within our team, 13 counselors, across the United States, we see quite a few results and have gone through quite a bit. So, and our students have been admitted to every top 50, including every Ivy League multiple times over. Our admit rate to top 15 schools is up to 7x the national average, and I've been grateful to have been profiled in a good wider range of publications, but. Invariably, what I'm here to do is to try to do my best to provide as much helpful content as I can, especially as it relates to the college list. So, topics for today: what factors matter when choosing colleges? And so there's just a ton of different different ways you can break that down. So we're going to talk about what I would consider as the more important factors and the factors I think you should think about first. Certainly, there are lots of very personal factors, as in, my grandmother wants me to apply to Harvard, wants me to go to Harvard. All my family went to college in Los Angeles. I mean, there are some very personal factors that are totally fine. Uh, but uh, but perhaps we can talk about, I think, some factors that I believe should relate to everybody. Secondly, is how do you start building a list of colleges to apply to? I mean, where do you begin? I mean, there's like 4,000 education, over 4,000 educational institutions in the United States, over 1,000 four-year universities. Like, where do you begin? Like, there's so many schools, and there are a lot of good schools. Where do we get started? And then we'll cover some questions at the end. So what are the most important factors when choosing colleges? And so let me outline, I think, three basic things that I think everyone should be at least touching upon and thinking about. Number one is academic fit. Number two is financial fit. And number three is social cultural fit. And as it relates to academic fit, I mean, it might seem a little bit basic, but does a school offer my major, right? So, I mean, I find that there's a lot of students who say, I really want to study business, and I really want to go to Stanford, but Stanford doesn't have an undergraduate business program, and I want to, yeah, so there's a basic element of does the school offer my major, and does it have the resources for me to pursue my area of study? Do I prefer small discussion-based classes or large lecture hall type environments? How many students return after freshman year and how many graduate in 4 years? I mean, in relation to the graduation rate, it's important because a higher graduation rate means that the operational support and access to classes is to such a degree to where students are able to complete their courses and to be able to secure the degree within 4 years or even 6 years. If the graduation rate is low, it gives a sense of perhaps the kind of resources that the students may or may not be lacking in that particular institution. Are internships accessible? What are the postgraduate job placement data? What is the graduate school placement rate? These are all a smattering, and there's more. I mean, we can post five, six, seven, or eight more questions here, but a smattering of questions to help you, students, and parents understand what's really most important to you. And so if I can maybe do a little bit of a comparison, right? So if I were to compare three schools here, UC Berkeley, Northeastern, and Pepperdine. And maybe, I mean, I'd assume most of you are familiar with UC Berkeley, a lot of Northern Californians here. Northeastern, located in the Boston area. Pepperdine, also located in Southern California. But if you kind of scan some of this information, and I don't need you to, I will highlight a couple of things, but I don't need you to kind of glaze over all the numbers. But like question being is like what's really most important to you? So if say going to med school is important to you and you knew that UC Berkeley's med school matriculation rate is 51%, Northeastern 80%, and remarkably Pepperdine's matriculation rate to med school is 91%. In if that was the hierarchy of what is valuable to you, you might really want to consider going to Pepperdine. I'm not saying you absolutely should. I'm not saying anything like that, but it's a consideration, and perhaps it should be a consideration. Um, if you're looking for, will I be able to get a job immediately after graduation? And if you look at the stats here for Northeastern, 98% get internships, 97% are employed within 6 months after graduation. So the employed slash GS is employed slash grad school. So 90%, 97% of students are either employed or in grad school within 6 months of graduation. And so when you look at this data, and one of the reasons is because Northeastern has a mandatory co-op slash internship program that where students are then often pipelined post graduation back into one of those co-op internships that they did while they were in school. And so they have a remarkably high employment rate, and it's why Northeastern is actually super popular right now. And even though Northeastern, ranked, ranked maybe in the upper 40s, lower 50s, depending on what year you're looking at the U.S. news. It's become a remarkably popular school for this reason, right? So perhaps if you're looking at employment rate, that's what might be valuable. But what if you're just looking for, like, say, like how many Fortune 500 CEOs attended each school, and maybe that's important to you because maybe it's a reflection of network. Maybe it's a reflection of a group of students who are very ambitious. Maybe it's students who are kind of fitting into the corporate ladder in a more effective way. Certainly, UC Berkeley has more Fortune 500 CEOs. So the reality is that there's like not one, like you can't just say that just because Berkeley is ranked higher than Pepperdine or Northeastern, it's automatically the better fit school for myself. So there are a host of different factors that to sort of factor in to what really makes a school a good fit for you as a student. And so, as I mentioned, higher ranked schools do not guarantee a better fit. And so this is where I'm, wanting to encourage students and families to really think about what's important for you, and not what's important for your classmates, what's important for other families who live somewhere else. What's really most important for you, and to do your best to really articulate clearly what will help me thrive for the long term, and less about what other people are doing and what the rankings just say. So, maybe a few questions to ask yourself is, what are my career goals? Do I prefer deep or wide learning? And the deep or wide learning has to do with every school often has a different kind of core or graduation curriculum. And so some universities like many of the Ivy Leagues, but including like a Columbia, they require a wide breadth of classes in a specific range of disciplines. So even if you're studying engineering, you have to take a certain amount of English courses, a certain amount of humanities courses. You have to take an extremely wide range of courses before you can graduate. While other universities allow you more freedom about what you can do with those general education courses, and you're sort of not. It's not necessary for you to take as wide of a breadth. So, thinking about like what's important to you is important. What learning environment best suits me, as we talked about earlier, whether it's like smaller classes or larger lecture hall type environments, whether it's kind of closer to your professors, or you feel comfortable learning with grad students, whatever it might be. Does the college support all my academic needs? So if you think about what are some of your academic needs, whether it's study abroad, whether it is research or research opportunities, whether it's internships, however it might be, how difficult is it to get research or internships? And will the college help uh, help me find employment? So, but maybe the last thing that I would consider as equally as important is what if I change my mind, right? So this is, and the reality, as I think I'll mention later in this presentation, is that 60% of students actually change their major before they graduate from college. And so if you're one of that 60%, then likely you might rethink whether you want to do electrical engineering and you might change your mind, or whether you want to do English and maybe switch over to data science, whatever it might be. If you change your mind, does the school have the resources to support you? Now, I think most schools have an extremely kind of wide academic breadth, um, department set. But certainly when you think about a school like, say, Carnegie Mellon, or which tends to be, you can argue as one of the top engineering schools in the world. But if you wanted to study, like, say, like European history, is that really the best place to be, right? So if you change your mind, does the school have what you need to pivot into different directions? All right, financial fit. I'm not gonna do an extensive conversation on financial fit, because we're going to bring on a college financial planner to do another webinar presentation. So please jump into that, if this is an important topic for you. But I did want to cover a couple of things because I do think it's important as it relates to I think most families, and especially because college is getting way more expensive every year, and until something changes, the cost of college is remarkable, right? So, and the first question is what can I afford per year for college? So I think really doing an honest assessment of what financial ability you have, and in order to make sure that like you kind of count the cost as you put together a list of schools. I did have a family a couple years ago who said we specifically only have around 45K per year to allocate to our daughter's college education. And so that's totally fine. I mean, 45 to 50K a year would cover in-state UCs, especially, for those of us who are here in California. But then we began looking at private schools where that student's academic level would then likely encourage that private school to give a merit aid package to try to attract that student to come. So oftentimes, oftentimes I think when I was growing up, I only thought about the UC system. I only thought about Fresno State, which was where I'm from, and I only thought about public schools because in my head, public school meant more affordable. But the reality is that many private schools are more able to give out merit aid and to give out aid to reduce the total cost of attendance for their particular school. So I always encourage students that even if cost is an issue, to consider applying to a range of private schools to really see what kind of package you might get. Because I often, maybe paint the example that if you get into like say UC Santa Cruz, but Occidental, Loyola, and Marymount gave you maybe 20 or 25,000 a year to go. Like, would you consider going? And I would say most people would at least consider it. And you only know if you actually submit the application to some of these schools. So understanding what you can afford can also help you, maybe put together a selection of other schools that might be able to fit your needs as well. So number two, does a school meet 100% of demonstrated need? This is actually all on the school's common data set. So if you just search the university plus common data set, you'll actually see whether if you're able to demonstrate a specific need via the FAFSA or the CSS. And if you can demonstrate that need and the school says they meet 100% of that demonstrated need, then you could be clear, you could be, more confident that the school would be able to meet that. Um, the third question is that what is the net price of the school? So every university has what they call a net price calculator. So you can just search school plus net price calculator, and you can enter in some basic family financial data, and then get a ballpark figure on what the total cost might be for your particular situation. So I would encourage you to use a net price calculator. I will admit that I think the net price calculator is like varying levels of accuracy. And you can't kind of bank on it to the specific dollar, but it does give you a good sense of where the financial aid package might be once you get the package after you're admitted. So, and then what are the hidden costs? I mean, if you think about having to, like, if you live in the Bay Area and you need to fly out to Ithaca, New York to go to Cornell, not a common airport. Maybe flying out is a little bit more expensive. And then you think about how many times you need to come home back and forth. Those are fees that add up, right? So whether it's lab fees because you're into research or whatever the case may be, what are the hidden costs that go into attending college? And then lastly, is a financial aid front loaded or renewable. Oftentimes schools will give a like scholarship or financial package or aid package. And then sometimes they give a big amount in the first year, but they're not clear on whether that amount is renewable every year. So you need to kind of be clear on asking those questions. So, all right. And then there's a social cultural fit, which maybe a few questions to ask yourself is what is the typical student archetype? I mean, like, I think, like, what type of student really succeeds well at this particular school. And so, I mean, the student who does well at Washington State is going to be a little bit different than a student who does well at Claremont McKenna, a little bit different than a student who does well at USC, right? So I think understanding the typical student type is helpful. Is the school a what they call a suitcase school, which is kind of a strange term, but is it a commuter school where students come in during the week, maybe they attend class and then go home, and then the school ends up being like very empty. And I've heard some comments, specifically at a family, really a family who decided to attend their daughter decided to attend University of Pacific in Stockton, and they were really impressed by the academic resources. And there are some really interesting academic resources, but it's total commuter school. Nobody's there on the weekends. Very few people are there in the evenings, and it wasn't really the cultural fit that was right for that student. And how much does school spirit matter to me? I have students who come in and they want like a higher priority for them is to go to a big football game. So if you're talking about a University of Michigan or an Ohio State, I mean those are fun football games. I've been to a few, and so I can understand it. How important is it for you? Are there enough people who share my identity? So whatever identity you might be thinking about or find that is important to you, are there enough of those people there? And it doesn't mean that there needs to be a lot, but it's just how might you define enough people? So, so I think it's fair and right to ask yourself that question, and whether you feel like you might fit in. How does a school handle conflict? I mean, I think we've seen in the news over the last couple of years, especially with a lot of protests on campus. How does a school handle conflict? And you might want to check the news and see how each school has been handling it. And what do people do for fun that isn't partying? So, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, every school does have a party environment or party group. And but what do people do other than just partying? And there's more access to different types of activities or the way people have fun, then it's going to be a better environment for you as well. So college tours. Maybe a couple of things to discuss as it relates to college tours. And maybe the lead into that is that as you've kind of looked at all these questions, are thinking through what might be of a higher priority for you, you might think that going to a college tour might be really helpful. And I would concur. So let's talk about college tours. And let me give you a couple of best practices. The first one is it's important if you go on a college tour, it is important for students to sign up for the official tour using their email. So and specifically the email that they're going to be using for their college app platform applications, college application platforms. So if you sign up for a Common App or you sign up for a University of California application platform using a particular email, then students should use that same email to register for tours, because there's no other way that universities are tracking whether students are actually interested in them other than with your email. Or that's there are other ways, but that's the primary way. So let me encourage you, if the whole family is going, have the students sign up using their email. You can set up maybe like a 10 or 15-minute information meeting with someone in the admissions office. And so I'll be honest with you, I think it's a little bit hit and miss, depends on the year. You don't always get a response. But if you do, then you might be able to meet with the person who's actually reading your application. And you can imagine if, like, at least a little bit of FaceTime, grabbing a card, sending a thank you email after the 15-minute information session, it goes a long way. So if you're going to do some visits, and then reach out. You have nothing to lose, and see if you can get 15 minutes to just ask some questions to the admissions staff who's in charge of your region. So so you can do that. Talk to students who are not leading the tour. So there's going to be invariably you go on a tour. There are students who are leading the tour. do your best to try to talk to students who are not leading the tour. So it could be if you're walking through the dining commons or you're just walking through the student union. Don't be afraid to just talk to students and ask them some questions, because the reality is that they are going to give you a less filtered perspective on their student experience. And so maybe number four, eat in the dining hall. Number five, I mean, number one, eat in the dining hall. But, if you can, give it a taste test. I really love Santa Clara University, by the way. I don't know anybody who's here from Santa Clara. I think the food is not that great. I mean, my goddaughter goes to Santa Clara University. I sometimes go by to grab lunch with her, and I just find it to be less than satisfying. I love Santa Clara as a school. Food's not that great. All right, number five, read the posters at the student union or dorms, because what is often on the on the post-up boards is often what's important to students. It's often what types of initiatives the university is putting forth to the students. I was at Washington University St. Louis maybe about five years ago, and I did notice that on all the dorm bulletin boards, the student union bulletin boards, there were a lot of flyers about, if you're struggling or having perhaps a mental health crisis, please speak with X. Or if you need extra support for stressful classes, please access the tutoring center. And so there was a period of time where Washington University St. Louis was known to be one of the most stressful schools in the United States. I think they've addressed that very well. I certainly highly endorse, a school like Washington University St. Louis, but you can get a sense of what's important to that school just by looking at what's on the bulletin boards. Obviously, visit your specific department, the academic department that's important to you. Sit in on a class and or observe the classroom. So if you can kind of see, sometimes there's a lot of classes that are sort of theater style, and you can kind of get a sense that like that's the type of lecture environment that's going to be. Maybe there's more classes that are smaller, that are maybe in a around a conference table, that kind of dictates or demonstrates what type of classroom environment it might be. Number eight, be honest about the weather. I feel like if you're visiting in the summertime, things might feel great. But if you're in the Northeast or in the Midwest in January, it's pretty cold. So I feel like just be honest about it. I don't necessarily feel like the weather should overly determine where you should go, but just be honest about where you sit on that. Number nine, visit all types. So no matter whether you have a preference, visit public schools, medium-sized private schools, liberal arts colleges. And so give yourself an opportunity to be in that environment and see what is a good fit for you. And I would suggest, if you go together as a family, to ask this question at the end. If I had to describe the school in one word, what would it be? And have everybody in the family, including the student and parents, and even siblings if they're going, have them try to reduce down their visit to just one word, and you can get a sense of whether automatically whether that might be a good fit. I did ask my goddaughter after our tour of Santa Clara, what she thought about it. I didn't, and I had been on a couple tours with her, and I asked her like, how would you describe this in one word? And her one word was home. And I was like shocked. So I'm happy because it's like down the street from where we live, but nevertheless, that sort of crystallized for her what her experience at Santa Clara was. So, all right, and maybe a couple of questions to ask students who are not leading a tour. My favorite question is, what's one thing you could change that would make your student experience 10x better? And so I always find that asking good questions to students, who are not leading the tour, will kind of get you a real glimpse. And maybe a few extra questions here. How late does campus stay alive? Is it easy to find a tutor? Do you feel like you're competing against or with your classmates? Questions that I think, again, asking students who are there would really help you get a better sense of what the experience is like. All right, so right fit colleges. We talk about academic career fit, financial fit, social cultural fit. Just a couple of other considerations that I didn't mention: location fit, admissions fit. What I mean, are you going to get in? I think that's a certainly a consideration, and the all important excitement fit, which is I think like there's something very subjective and personal about whether you can see yourself at a school, and it's very difficult to quantify. So, but it is not an unimportant factor. Like, do you feel excited about going? And that does matter. So let me kind of share with you a little bit of data. I forgot to kind of post the source on this, and I can send it to you if you'd like. But 2024 Independent Institute did research on what matters when choosing in college. They asked students when they were teens, when they were still in high school, and then they asked recent grads, and they compared the two. So you can kind of give yourself like a little bit of a glimpse, um, give yourself a little bit of a glimpse into kind of where it's at. You can kind of see that maybe when you're, when you're in high school, maybe closer to home might be more important. You can see that when for a lot of students who just graduated, the class size became more important. So maybe to kind of give you a quick summary of this chart, what mattered most for high school students and parents at the start of the college search was location or near to home, popularity or prestige of in this image. What this survey did was STEM majors, and or safety. And what mattered most after students graduated was small class sizes, research and or internship opportunities, and low student debt. So I think, when you think about, what I always, try to tell families to have an open mind, even though maybe the preference is closer to home, that to really consider, broadly across the United States, even though again, maybe the higher priority is to stay more near to home, yeah, again, broaden that perspective, have the option, even again, regardless. I would find this aspect of safety to be a little bit deceptive too, because I feel like oftentimes the campuses that feel less safe are not as unsafe as you think they are. The campuses that feel very safe tend to be less safe than you think they are. Um, like just as a data point, just so you know, Stanford has always come up as one of the top one, two, or three highest crime rates among four-year universities in California, right? So the reality is that I mean, often, I mean, especially for those of us who live in the Bay Area, seems like Stanford is a very kind of pristine area. Seems like a very very safe campus, but it always comes up as a school with a fairly high crime rate. And so my encouragement is to perhaps think more broadly, and maybe learning from students who just graduated, that maybe looking at smaller class sizes, better access to research and internships, and lower student debt probably going to be a little bit more important. All right, so how do I build a college list that is right for me? So this is like again a 6 hour conversation that I will only spend 10, 15 minutes as an introduction. And if there's more requests, we can cover more of this topic in another webinar. But if you have a sense of what your college major will be, you have an estimate for what you can afford, and you have some other non-negotiables like location. I need to be in warmer weather. I need to be closer to my family, whatever the case may be. Maybe you have a couple of preferences or non-negotiables. If you have these three things in mind, I would encourage you to think through these three things first before coming in to build a list. But if you have these three things, um, my thing is that you need to begin to define what your like admittability is. Like, what's a good admissions fit? And so you can begin with comparing a student's average GPA, test scores, and resume to determine an appropriate range of colleges. So maybe you can start looking at national averages, which I think are actually the least accurate. You can look at your high school specific data. I mentioned Naviance here because Naviance is a it's a it's a CRM data platform that allows high schools, to maintain their own specific, like high school specific data for students who are going off to college. But there's other platforms like Maya Learning or Score. So, but whatever brand it might be, almost every high school uses a college data like kind of storage place for students to be able to search for colleges and for them to review the admissions trends that have been happening at their own high school, right? So looking at high school specific data through, in this case, Naviance data, um, looking at your GPA and your SAT and ACT scores, extracurricular activities, early admission programs, which I'm talking about early decision. We are not going to go in depth into ED1, ED2. That's another webinar. But you should begin by like understand where you sit, where your GPA test scores and resume sit in relation to other students nationally and specifically with your school. And oftentimes we use this as a beginning point. This is not a hard and fast rule. So don't, please, I know as I say this, I can understand that people are maybe screenshotting the slide. It's not hard and fast, but generally speaking, one way to begin to look at whether a school is a good fit for you is to, whether you might be admitted, is to take a look at the average GPA and test score data. And if you're above the 75th percentile, then you can kind of get a sense of, and if there's an average entry GPA, there's an average entry SAT or ACT score. If you're at the 75th percentile, then you're in a stronger position. If you're somewhere within the 50th or 74th percentile, I would say that you're kind of in that target, maybe 50-50 likelihood of getting in. And if you're below that 50th percentile, it becomes more of a reach, right? So I mean that's kind of maybe a basic understanding of it as it relates to national averages. Now, maybe just to define this quickly, a safety school, maybe, and our definition might be like a safety school might be like you have a 75% chance of being admitted. Target school maybe around 50%. And then for reach schools, maybe 25 to 30% or less chance of being admitted. And so maybe it's to kind of give you an example of a student that we've worked with. This student, his name is Theo, applying to Cornell. If you look on the national averages, actually this might be different. This is maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. But if you look at national averages, it's a 3.88 admitted GPA, unweighted GPA, and a 1470 on the SAT. Theo's GPA is a 3.75, and his ACT is a 34, which is higher than the average ACT of a student being admitted to Cornell, but his GPA is lower than the average GPA of a student being admitted to Cornell. So for us, the determination is that this is a reach school for Theo. Right? So I mean, I think there's really no other way to look at it in that sense. Um, and so if you do have access to your high school specific data, whether it's on the Naviance platform, the Score platform, the Maya Learning platform, whichever platform it is, the data points that you want to be paying attention to are average GPA of students admitted. So like they will have like from that particular school, the average GPA of students from that particular high school being admitted to Cornell, to George Washington, to Arizona State. And you'll be able to see that data more specifically. Average SAT of ACT of students admitted, application history, number of applied, number of those admitted, those enrolled, percentage admitted on the regular deadline, percentage admitted on the early deadline. Not every school will have all of that data, but these platforms will have a lot of that data. And so it's important to take a look at what's happening at your own high school and not what's happening on a national level. So average GPA test scores accepted on RD, average GPA test scores accepted on EDEA, they're likely going to be a little bit different. And so it's important to understand that. And then sometimes some platforms will have percentage waitlisted. That's not as common, but occasionally some schools will collect that data. This is just a kind of a quick maybe way to kind of decide whether to put a school in a reach, target, or safety realm. So if you look at the top line, if you're below the average GPA, obviously it's probably going to, in almost every situation is going to be a reach. If you go to the far right, if you're above average, if you're above the average GPA by like say zero point 0.2 points, and this is on a standard 4 point scale. Now, some schools are a 6 point scale, a 7 point scale, understood. But just generally speaking, on a 4 point scale, if you're like, if the average entry GPA is 3.6 and you're at a 3.8, then you're zero point 0.2 points higher, right? So if you're like, say, above the average admitted GPA by zero point 0.2 points, and if you go to the bottom, you're above the average SAT, ACT score by 100 points on the SAT or 2 points on the ACT, then you can probably be comfortable that it's a safety school. But otherwise, for a lot of other schools, it's better to kind of put that school into a more conservative bracket and to make sure that you build a list that is safer. So there may be questions on this. We can talk about this another time. Here is a little cutout of screenshot of what it looks like on Naviance. So if, in this case for Theo, he's applying to Cornell University, you can see there's a college match tool on Naviance to where you can line up the students' data with the universities that you're thinking about and then see which schools might be a better fit for that student. So utilize the tools that your high school has to really understand how to make better choices. So that's what it looks like here. And then for your extracurricular activity resume, the for top 30 universities, the resume does mean more. And the reality is that you can probably understand for students who are applying in the top 30 schools, I mean, the majority of students, overwhelming majority of students have very clean grade point averages and high test scores. So, I mean, you're coming in, I mean, if everyone has good grades and good test scores, what's the differentiator between one student and the next? And it's really gonna be in what you do outside of class. So the resume becomes more important. Activities need to support the intended major, especially for very selective majors. So as you probably maybe have heard from other friends or other families, students who in the last 5 or 6 years, students who are applying to computer science have been having a hard time getting into the schools that they've been wanting to get into. And so there are majors that are more difficult to gain admission, and invariably some majors where it is not as difficult. I don't want to say it's easy because that's not really accurate, but where the amount of students who want to apply into the number of spaces, they're just not as many, right? So maybe to kind of give you a quick glimpse at the most popular majors for 2024, um, there, I think you can kind of get a sense of, business, pre-health, which is biology, econ, computer science is up here, engineering. Engineering is always more difficult, by and large, right? So engineering is going to be in this bracket as well. But just to kind of give you a sense of what are the more selective majors, and maybe to give you a comparison, just some comparison data from as it relates to like number of degrees conferred, you can kind of get a sense that computer science and information sciences and engineering and pre-med have grown the most, right? So, which is for the other majors, social science, history, English language and lit, foreign languages, have not grown in contrast. So that might maybe give you a sense of the majors that may be more challenging to be admitted to, and maybe some majors that are maybe slightly less challenging. All right. All right. So, um, I want to save time for questions. So let's see if I can get through this last bit of content as quickly as I can. As it relates to the assessment of your resume, leadership is important. There's no question. And I feel like this is another extracurricular activities is like another 2 hour 2 hour webinar. So apologies. But leadership demonstrates student initiative. Research and academic competitions demonstrate students' subject matter depth. And community service demonstrates awareness and concern for those around them. So, most schools are paying attention to all three. And so our has a student demonstrated leadership, has a student demonstrated some matter of subject matter depth. I'm not saying that research and academic competitions are the only way. Don't read it that way. But they are looking for subject matter depth, and they are looking to see whether a student is aware of what's happening in their community. So this is certainly another conversation we can get into in more depth at another time. I'm gonna throw this in here only because 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 I want it to be helpful as a barometer. I don't want it to be a hard and fast sort of threshold. So don't read it as such. But generally, normally, in order to just sort of give ourselves internally, this is maybe some a barometer for whether a student is even in the ballpark. Oftentimes, we kind of come back to, if you're like looking to apply into top 20 universities, I mean, do you have around 3,000 hours of extracurricular activity involvement, like over the course of 4 years? If you total it up, I promise you, students have way more EA hours than you think. But how involved are students outside of school? Um, for the honors and AP number, it's number of semesters. So how many semesters of AP or honors courses do you have by the time you graduate? So if you're talking about 20 semesters of AP or honors courses, you're talking about like maybe 4 APs junior year, 4 APs senior year, maybe one AP sophomore year, maybe a couple of honors classes in freshman and sophomore year. Comes out to around 20 semesters, right? So like oftentimes just to kind of give you a quick barometer. It doesn't mean that every person who like nobody's been admitted to a top 20 university who's had under 20 semesters. That's not the case either. But just to kind of give you a ballpark about whether a student is more viable for a particular range of school, this is something to consider. So, all right, let me give you a couple of examples before we open up the questions. Um, these are real students, but unfortunately not real photos. So we'll just to kind of give you a few examples. Saratoga High School student had a good GPA, a reasonably good test score on the ACT. I think involved in orchestra, was a robotics team captain. Attended an MIT launch summer program where he launched an iPhone app. They had 5,000 downloads. And he's a natural leader, a hands-on learner, and wants to study electrical engineering. Just to comment quickly, I think this student's resume is not bad. I think there were a few other things. There's maybe a couple other leadership opportunities, some involvement, but I wouldn't say it's like a top 5% type resume, right? So maybe again to give you an example of what a college list, just some examples of what was in the student's college list. We did consider applying early decision to Johns Hopkins, to UCLA, UC Davis, Purdue for Target, Ohio State, Texas A&M. But if you understand these schools, these are all like actually classic, well-funded, very well-equipped resource engineering schools. The student wants to study electrical engineering, really wants to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of his area of study, and these are really kind of classic places to do that. And so this is what his and if you look at the Ohio State and Texas A&M, even though the student's GPA is very strong, this student wants to make sure that no matter what happens, this student has good options. And I would argue that Ohio State and Texas A&M are amazing engineering schools when you dig into it. For another student named Ronald, Hamilton High School, specifically in Chandler, Arizona, 3.4, 3.65 weighted GPA, 1,300 on the SAT. He was a martial arts person, Model UN VP, and had an internship in finance. He prefers big cities, not small schools. He's excited about sort of that big city and big campus environment, and he wants to study business econ. So schools that we we put onto his list or suggested to be put onto his list: University of Illinois, University of Washington, Rutgers, Loyola Marymount for target schools, and then for safety schools, George Washington and Washington D.C., and Arizona State, which is his home school, excuse me, home university. And so, but if you kind of dig into it, these are all actually very, again, well-established undergraduate business schools, lots of resources, good access to internships. Most of these are in fairly large metropolises, so they kind of fit into what he was looking for in a university setting. And yeah, yes, super happy and was remarkably admitted to University of Illinois, thankfully. So. All right. And then Taylor, who attended Hong Kong International School, unweighted GPA 3.63, 3.82, ACT 31, songwriting club president, speech and debate. Surprisingly, even though she was in speech and debate, she prefers small group discussions, a little bit more introverted, wants to know her professors, and prefers being on the West Coast and wants to study English. And so her school list looked a little bit like this. um, you know, uh, weighted towards the West Coast, um, uh, looking at schools that are a little bit smaller. USC is not small, but USC is also not Ohio State, right? So USC, Pitzer, University of San Diego, Chapman, Occidental, Seattle University, obviously very weighted towards the West Coast, and slightly smaller school with a very developed English department. So college list items or college list topics that are important that we didn't discuss today: early decision, choosing the right college major, college financial planning, college hidden gems. They are forthcoming in another webinar. And I would love it if you could post in chat what topics you want us to cover in the future. So please feel free to do that. But a couple last considerations before they go to questions. Um, Maybe something to think about is that might it be better to be like a higher student at a lower ranked school versus a lesser student at a higher ranked school. And maybe I should really rethink the higher and lesser terms, but oftentimes, perhaps going to a school where you're at maybe the top half or top third of the sort of academic spectrum of that school may lead to a place where you have more access to internships. You feel a little bit more confident. There's an interesting, fascinating sociological study that compared the top 20% of students who graduated from Michigan State versus the bottom 20% of students who graduated from Dartmouth. And they found that the top 20% of the students who graduated from Michigan State had double the mid-year career earnings of the bottom 20% students from Dartmouth. So, something to think about. Undergrad is only one stop on the educational journey. College prestige matters some, but I would contend much less than you think. And I think the data does support this. And so we can certainly cover that in another webinar. And then on average, 60% of students change majors before graduating. So certainly, like this is not, there's opportunities to change your mind. And then location does have impact on post-grad recruiting. Oftentimes, a lot of the regional companies that are recruiting from particular universities are doing it regionally. So, I mean, for example, I had a student at graduated from computer science at UIUC. His first job was with Target, which is based in Minneapolis, and he was with the software development arm of Target, and he was recruited because he was at UIUC, yeah, University of Illinois, just south of Minnesota. So, all right. Lastly, do your research. There are good colleges out there. Apply to both public and private schools because private schools can provide more scholarships. Review admissions trends at your high school, and I always encourage people to apply to more safety schools. And then lastly, as all my kind of consistent encouragement to all families and students, especially in a very stressful college app cycle, is just remind your student that you love them regardless of how the results turn out. I always find that students know they feel the pressure, they know what's at stake. and continue to remind them that no matter where they go or where they end up or what they get admitted to or not admitted to, that you are a safe place. So just as an encouragement to you, reminder, and let's go on to some questions. Let me invite Anna back. And it's 6:56 West Coast time. We will definitely go past a little bit past the hour. So those of you who need to drop can certainly drop whenever you'd like. But we'll hang out for a little bit and try to answer some questions. So Anna, so if you have some questions, go ahead and please post them on the Q&A. And then Anna, what do we got today?
Yeah, well, yeah, please feel free to open up the Q&A, send us any questions while we're answering these first few. But we have a question about college selection timing. What is the best time for, or even just the right time for a student to kind of get started researching, building their list, whichever class they are, if they're a junior or senior, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I didn't mention here is that I think the optimal time to do college tours is spring break of 11th grade because spring break 11th grade for a lot of students is sometime in April. Whatever college you go to, that college is most likely not on spring break, so you can kind of see that college in full bloom. Talk to people who are in the admissions office, possibly, and then get a sense. So I do feel like I think it's good to do some research starting second semester 11th grade. Some families will maybe want students and families will want to do it earlier, but the reality is that your academic profile and activity profile is not finalized yet. So you have through the end of the summer after 11th grade to kind of finalize everything academically and you finalize your profile, so to speak. And so I oftentimes tell families to um, yeah, maybe second semester 11th grade begin to put together some schools that you think might be a good fit. Go take a few tours, see what type of excitement kind of fit might be good for you as you think about what school might be fitting, and then you have the beginning points of what type of environment may be a good fit. So.
For sure. Yeah, actually, speaking of college tours, since spring break is coming up for a lot of people, how do you recommend that they make the most out of a college tour, or even if they're going just by themselves without going with, prescribed college run tour, if they're going by themselves, what do they do for this college visit?
Yeah, I mean, I did post some questions you can bring, so and also a few best practices, but definitely sign up for an official tour. So if you're able to go visit the school, I think that's great. Certainly there's a lot of benefit to that, but I know not everybody is able to actually go out to every school or go out to even a few schools. I would suggest still going to like if you're like maybe there's a lot of people from the Bay Area. If you're not able to go out of region, then go to the local schools. So even if you visit Santa Clara, UC Berkeley, Stanford, University of San Francisco, those are four extremely different schools. And then you can get a sense of what type of environment may be a good fit for you. Even if none of those four schools are exactly on your list, visiting locally will still help you. I do feel like the biggest thing I mentioned was, maybe signing up using your student's email and then trying to talk to students who are not leading the tour. So again, going into student union, dining commons, be brave and talk with some students and ask them some questions and then get the real juice on what's going on campus.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of student events that happen to be going on, sometimes overlapping with your visit, so it might be worth a shot
Mhm.
also to see what's going on there. Um, I guess someone asked, is it too late to arrange college tours for this spring? I'm assuming maybe this is a senior or parent of a senior.
If it's a parent of a senior, I think if you're getting, so I do have, there's certainly not every family or student will go on college tours in the spring. But oftentimes what families might do is that they'll wait for all the college results to come through and then they'll go do their visits. So right now it's middle of February. Results are slowly trickling in, but you probably get the most of your results in March and maybe even early April. And then once you get our results, I have students who are just like families who are then doing mad dashes across the US to go visit several schools to see where they end up going. So you can certainly do that as well. Is it too late to schedule tours? I mean, I think they're filling up, but no, I think you can check the you can just search whatever school and then search for official tour or tours, and then you'll get the link to see what the availabilities are. So
For sure. Also, they corrected me, sorry, junior student, but this advice still stands, I would say.
okay, sounds
Yeah.
good.
All right.
Agreed. Yeah.
Um, Also, yes, our this session will be posted on the website, or rather on our YouTube channel. So this will be sent out also as a link to all the attendees. So don't worry about if you wanted to go back and see something that you missed, this will be there and accessible.
That's
Someone
correct.
asked about a specific slide that you had on extracurricular rankings. What do the acronyms AG and EA mean?
Oh, okay. All right. Sure, sure. So, let me go back to that slide just so that there's a sort of intentionality to want to not spend that much time on that slide, but I understand the curiosity, so maybe we can talk about it. So AG is A through G credits. So this is specifically University of California review rubric process, and A through G is part of the UC's assessment of how many A through G credits you have completed by the time you graduated. So this is number of semesters um, over the course of your entire high school career, right? So obviously, again, not not every not it doesn't mean that you have to have completed 56 semesters of A through G courses in order to get into UC Berkeley, UCLA, but to also be honest that the UC does count the amount of the number of UC A through G semesters that have been completed as one of the 13 factors that are part of the UC rubric. So I think that was the only question on what A through G AG was, correct?
Yeah, that was the only
Okay,
one.
great. I'm gonna flip off this slide so that we can go to the
Sounds good.
any other questions?
We have one more question. I think this is kind of in relation to maybe the trajectory of someone's. Oh, sorry. They said also EA. They want to know what EA stood for.
Extracurricular activities.
There you
So
go.
yeah. Yep. Hmm.
All right. But yes, going back to the other question, it's kind of connected to the trajectory of someone's kind of high school transcript, I think, over the years. But
Hmm.
someone was a little concerned about, okay, what if my child, or what if I as a student gets a relatively lower grade in maybe freshman year? How does that affect kind of the course of my admit later on? I think the answer is always that improvement is better, but you could probably go more in depth.
Yeah, that's a good response, Anna. So I think
Thank you.
and yeah. So um one thing I didn't talk about is certainly the contour of the transcript, and certainly not everybody is able to maintain like a perfect GPA. That's just not how life is, right? So but always an upward trend is always better than a downward trend. I think that's if I were to summarize it all into one statement, I'd probably say that. So student gonna be in ninth grade, by far not the end of the world. Absolutely not. And my encouragement to the student is just continue to make improvement, have some reflection on what you can do better, and make some adjustment over the course of the forthcoming semesters and beyond. So,
All right. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have, unless someone has one last burning one, but I think that's it.
all right, all right. So we'll all get to go home and watch some figure skating tonight. That comment's not going to date well on an old YouTube video, but nevertheless, we'll enjoy it. Hey, thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. We have a full lineup of webinar topics coming up for this coming year, so please keep an eye out on the emails. And I really appreciate you joining us tonight. And if you want to schedule a free consultation, you can do so there. And happy to answer more specific questions on your particular student case and to give a little bit more detail where needed. So thank you, everybody. Thanks so much, Anna. Good to see everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.